May 2002, Belleville, New Jersey. The whole day I was more than a little nervous about doing my vocals. We had done a version of Vampires in our rehearsal studio similar to how we recorded the Attic demo, Dreams About Stabbing and or Being Stabbed. The vocals on the demo came out terrible and sounded nothing like they did when we played the song live. We began to wonder if maybe I just come out bad on recordings. I've heard stories about bands that were solely live bands and didn't translate well when recorded. The day came to record, and we took the drive up to Nada in upstate New York. As soon as we stepped out of the Pensy Prep van, I felt at ease. It had just rained, and everything was gray and damp. The studio was on a dead-end street, and there was this nice little house that didn't seem to fit in with its surroundings. We started laying down drum tracks, and John brought to our attention that the tempo for the song was 187. We're a little superstitious, and took this as an omen. We then laid down guitar tracks, and everything sounded great. But I started to get more nervous, thinking I was going to botch up this whole recording by sounding like a little girl or coming off flat. Mike laid over his bass tracks in record time, and then we broke down the drums, getting ready to do the vocals. We started moving the drums out to the van, and I was surprised to see what it looked like outside. The sky had become dark blue and jet black, and the wind was so strong we thought Mikey was going to blow away. Trees were whipping around, and a huge storm was rolling in, but it was strangely warm and felt very comforting. Then I knew my vocals were going to come out just the way I wanted. I could feel this weird excitement. Everything felt charged with energy. I then went into the recording room and got ready. Alex came in and gave me a hug for good luck. Then he punched me in the jaw. The rest is history. G.
What is up, my friends? Welcome to My Chemical Fancast. I'm Haley.
And I'm Kat.
And this is a podcast about all things My Chemical Romance. Today we are wrapping up the album we have just discussed, which is Bullets.
I brought you my bullets. You brought me your love.
Everybody here knows it. Actually, I don't know if we've said the full album title.
No, we haven't. That's why I'm saying it now.
We haven't said it since maybe, the first official episode.
Yeah. I noticed that. It was like,
I mean, it's just, it's a mouthful.
Yeah, it is. Well, what are you gonna do?
Yeah.
You're an emo band in the early 2000s. What are you gonna do?
It's gotta be a long title.
Mm-hmm.
Everything has to be a long title.
Mm-hmm.
Today we're discussing everything that happens basically after Bullets, before Revenge. And a couple things we missed in the recording process of Bullets and some things like that.
Do you wanna jump right in?
We always jump right in, you know?
I know.
We gotta.
Just gotta dive right in that pool of blood.
Oh.
I didn't think that'd make you laugh so much.
Oh, man.
Okay.
What's the first thing we have to cover here?
The first thing we have to cover, or at least the first thing in my notes, is some stuff that we touched on but didn't flesh out about the impetus or the story behind how Bullets got created. So, we talked about how, after 9/11, Gerard had this moment where he was like, I don't want to work in an office anymore, I want to do something that's meaningful, and for him that was creating music. But later on, in I think this was posted in 2013, someone asked him about his views on religion, and he posted on Twitter, in a twit longer, this long, post about his views on religion. And it also included this element to the beginning of My Chemical Romance that you hadn't discussed before, which I think is cool, and just wanted to mention, and we can talk about it, maybe.
Mm-hmm.
So this is what he said. I firmly believed in creating MCR, I was given a mission from God, not unlike the scene in the Blues Brothers. The mission involved helping people and battling the forces of evil by using word and the purifying flames produced by Marshall half-stack amplification. This is true, it is also my version and my story, and if you disagree, one day you can tell your own version of your own personal story, but this one is mine, as are my beliefs. So, there's this sort of religious element to him starting MCR, which I think gives another layer to the whole idea of creating a band that will save the world or, saves people, that we didn't talk about before, and I think that's really interesting.
Mm-hmm.
Because you can talk about, that MCR is, a band that saves people or a band that saved themselves. But I think when you have the background of he, genuinely felt a calling to do the band, that it makes that message seem more true and heartfelt rather than, a gimmick.
Right, right. Yeah, it was real for him. It was really like his whole life and what he committed to.
Yeah.
And his whole soul was in that.
Like, he's not kidding. He wants to save your life.
He is a dedicated dude. No matter what he's done in his life, like, everything he's done, he's dedicated to it.
Yeah.
Like, 100%.
And I think it also... I mean, I think he mythologizes a little bit the beginning of the band and the recording of the first album, as is evident in his story about recording vampires, and that there was this big ominous storm, and that their beats per minute for the song is 187, which is like the slang for murder or something. Like, I think he like has this origin story about the band that is very dramatic and mythological, and I also think that kind of fits with like who he is as a guy that likes comic books and origin stories. But I don't think that he uses it only as aesthetic or a gimmick. I think he like really believes that about the band, which is a new way of thinking about it.
Yeah, it's one thing to think like, oh, Gerard is just being dramatic, but you know, he's a dramatic dude. But when you think about the fact that he has put his whole heart and soul into everything that he does, and that he believes in this 100%, and you can feel that he believes in it too. Everybody else can feel it, and I think that's why it worked, is because he believed in it so wholeheartedly.
Yeah, and I think it stayed with him through MCR, throughout MCR's life. I think you can see him like struggling a little bit with that, like when we get to the Black Parade era, or especially like after Black Parade, when he looks back on it in retrospect and feels like it wasn't taken positively, like it wasn't received positively. I think that's when he starts to struggle with, oh, I want this band to do good, but did it do good in this, you know, with this album, in this scenario? And then like Danger Days happens, then the band breaks up, and I think that's I think like that thread of genuinely wanting MCR to do good, believing that MCR was meant to do good for a higher purpose, and then at the end of it, not knowing if it fulfilled those goals is like a real central core to MCR and to Bullets.
Right.
That's important to keep in mind.
Yeah. All right, I wanted to talk a little bit about how the band interacted with one another, because we talked a lot about them individually, but not much about how they interacted and worked with one another as band members, and then becoming, you know, brothers and best friends. And a gang. Yeah. I wanted to touch on that because I feel that it's important to how the band portrays their message and how they write music and why they were so successful. Because for bands that don't mesh as well together as MCR did, you can tell. Like, people who listen to the music and even watch interviews and stuff with bands that don't mesh as well, you can tell.
Yeah. And there's a lot of bands that have like the front man is the band, or like the front man and like one other person, and they have like a revolving door of other personnel.
Yeah, and
this
like,
is not that band.
Yeah, none of the band members are expendable, except for, you know, people that they have legitimate problems with.
Yeah.
But once they form that bond and they're in that gang, you know, if they can work it out, then they do.
Mikey, Ray, Frank, Gerard.
Yeah.
Bros for life.
The four core. I wanted to touch on how right after the Bullets tour, and we'll talk about the Bullets tour and everything that happened with it, but since we're on band dynamics, I wanted to touch on Matt leaving.
This was their first foray into like having to kick someone out or having to change something about how the band was working. And they didn't, you know, because it happened in like 2004, didn't talk about it a lot because they didn't really need to at the time.
Right.
Matt's pretty salty about it.
Oh yeah, still salty.
So salty about it. I think I don't have the quote from him, but I think he said something like, this is supposed to be a band of brothers, and they like kicked me out or something.
Right.
So we don't know specifically, absolutely the reasons why he was kicked out, but
I feel that the main reason was that it was just creative differences and the fact that he refused to use a click track.
Yeah, he kept having timing issues, especially in live performances, and Matt, whenever he like did an interview about it, sort of alleges to the fact that there may have been like one show where like he really fucked up and Ray got really upset and was like, you need to use a click track, and he was like, I don't want to use a click track, and Ray was like, but you need to use a click track. So I think there was like probably a lot of different small issues, but I do think like it came to a head at one show where he may have gotten like super off time and they couldn't figure out a way to resolve it because like he wouldn't use a click track, and it was sort of bringing down the vibe and bringing down the quality of their performances because they really wanted their performances to be good.
Yeah, if you have been in a band or if you're, you know, a musician and you've performed with a group before, you know that the drummer is the most important part.
Yeah, he keeps everyone else.
Yeah, everybody relies on the drummer. If you get lost in the song, you can
look at the drummer.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, the drummer is really important. So if the drummer is off in a performance, the whole band is going to be off and it's going to mess everything up. So, you know, I feel that if everyone is really committed to the band and wants to grow the band and work it as a business, then they have to make those hard decisions like that.
Then why wouldn't you use a click track, man?
You know, that's what I'm saying. If you just, I mean, I know that was not the only issue. Like, if that was the only issue, then, you know.
But it is, like, kind of a big issue, because, like, it's a simple solution, and, like, is your ego too big to let you use, I mean,
right.
It's not uncommon to use a click track.
And I think that was another big thing, was that his personality ended up not meshing as well with the band.
Yeah.
Because he's really headstrong, he's really, really stubborn, combative, not willing to listen to criticism, and I'm taking all of this from Alex Saavedra's mouth.
Mm-hmm.
Like, Alex has said this, that Matt was not willing to listen to anybody.
Alex spilled the tea.
He sure did.
Oh,
he's not afraid to do it. He's not afraid. Alex said, hey, let's just have John Niclario, the owner of Nada Studios, record the drums for us, and Matt will never know.
Ooh.
It'll be fine.
Insert the gif of that crowd going like, ooh.
Yeah, I disagree with this thought that he had, but Ray was very against it.
No, of course, you shouldn't do that.
Yeah, no, and I think that's really admirable of him. Like, you know, he's our brother, he's a musician, you know, it would,
He also probably doesn't want any, like, fakery on this album.
Right. And, yeah, so that's literally what Alex said, though, was like, we can just record this, and we'll be like, oh, yeah, hey, Matt, this is totally you, we just cleaned it up a bit, we just tweaked it a little bit.
Oh, God.
Yeah, but...
He's out for blood.
Yeah. I mean, if you know, that's kind of the music industry, though. If you want everything to be tight and clean and good, and you don't want to have to deal with the legal proceedings that would have to happen with getting rid of a band member, then, you know, cut out the middleman. I think that was admirable of Ray, though. Even if the band took a hit because of it, they wanted to be 100% genuine in everything that they did. And it must have been especially hard for Ray because Ray is such a perfectionist.
Yeah, I bet his mind was exploding.
Yeah.
I bet he could not deal with it, especially when he refused the click track. I bet he just could not understand.
Yeah.
I don't know the exact, like, date when he was let go. I think it's when they got back from Japan. I think.
Yeah, it was. He said
they were like, you know, everything's gone to shit, and you know what we can't deal with? This one other problem.
Yep. Everything was literally gone to shit then. And we'll get into that in a second. But just dealing with Matt at the moment, he said that Ray took him aside right after they got back from Japan, and it was like Ray and I think Alex, and nobody else was there. And they talked to him. God. And they said, hey, we're going to have to let you go.
Oh, Ray.
And that was about it.
Ray is not afraid to cut someone.
No.
Oh my God. Don't get on Ray's bad side,
for
guys.
real. I mean, he's so sweet, and he stuck up. You know, obviously, he stuck up for Matt in that he didn't want his recording replaced, and you know, to have to lie to him. But he's took care of business.
Wow.
Yeah. I also think that Matt was kind of the most stereotypically macho of the group, and that was maybe one reason he didn't fit in. Also, because we know that the rest of the guys are a little bit softer, a little bit more fluid. Even Ray, he's a little bit softer than Matt was.
Mm-hmm.
I think that because he was so much of a stereotypical guy.
Just like a bro-ishness.
Yeah, he's a real bro. And I think after a while, that maybe didn't mesh as well with their personalities. One of the things that I heard Matt say in the studio video where Gerard was recording vocals and he and Ray were in a hallway just talking, and I heard Matt go, Gerard's gonna get all the punani.
Oh, Jesus. Oh, boy.
Yeah.
I'm sure that Matt, you know, is a good person. I just think at that time he wasn't the right person for the band.
Right.
And maybe had not become the good person that I'm sure he is today.
Yeah, no, I'm sure he's a great, I mean, he's a dad now, he's a husband.
Yeah.
You know, he's living his best life. And I think just at that point that they were all so young, that they were all kind of at different stages of maturity and, you know, different stages of life where I think after a while, after the experiences they had, they just didn't mesh as well.
I also know a lot of, like, off-the-rails drummers. Like, drummers are, like, the biggest grab bag of people and attitudes.
Yeah.
It's a weird experience.
Drummers are weird.
But they replaced him pretty quickly with Bob Breyer, who Bob had been a sound tech for The Used, who MCR went on tour with during their Bullets days. And they tapped him to do drums, or maybe Brian tapped him to do drums, and brought him on, and I think, like, days later, like, less than a week for sure, they were recording the video for I'm Not Okay. So it was a very intense process.
Yeah, you noticed that there are no close-ups of Bob.
Oh yeah, they were like, we don't know if this is gonna stick. We're just gonna swoop the camera right over this person.
When they're walking down the hall, he's not with them.
No, he's not in the school shots at all.
He's not in the uniform or anything. They're just like, I don't know if this guy's staying, so we're just gonna kind of bypass that.
Yeah, which is very valid.
It is valid.
And so Matt recorded 3 Cheers for Sweet Revenge, but obviously did not really play it live very much. And then Bob played the album live when they toured and would eventually record Black Parade.
Right.
But in other Bullets history.
Yeah.
Unless there's anything else to say about Matt. Mm-hmm. So we've sort of touched on this at our very first, like, teaser episode. I'm just going to go over a little bit of it to give you some more details. So MCR recorded Bullets on Eyeball Records, which is headed up by Alex Saavedra. And it was recorded in May 2002 at Nada Studios, which is owned by John Nicolario. And Alex, John, Jeff, and Tucker Rule helped record the album. And Tucker is also now in Frank's new band, which we don't know the name of. Fighting Vegans? I don't know.
Feisty Vaqueros.
Yeah. Could be anything. I feel like the F, the second F, must stand for faithful. It seems a very Frank thing to put in there, but I don't know what the V would be.
I don't know. Frankenstein villains. I don't know.
Or 4.
4.
Like 4V. I don't know. We're going to find out what the name is, but we don't know yet. And Jeff had actually been out on tour with Thursday at the time, but managed serendipitously to have a break in his schedule, and so he flew back to New Jersey to help produce the album. What a stand-up guy.
Yeah, he did not have much time off, and he spent about half that time off recording the album with them.
And Frank Iero joined the band 2 days before they went to record. He was obviously familiar with the band because he knew their songs, played their demos a lot, you know, had given them a van to tour in, and they were always around Pensy, but he officially joined the band 2 days before they recorded, which is crazy. The album, they described it more of like an album made out of necessity because it needed something to tour on, and the songs on the album were like all the songs they had that weren't covers. Mm-hmm. And Ray in Life on the Murder Scene kind of says that on Bullets they don't really have an identity and that every song sounds different from the rest.
Right.
Which I think is kind of cool because, like, for sure this is not a put together album, but I like that you can tell, like, they had a lot of styles and ideas they were playing with.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I mean, we've said this before, that it's kind of an exploration album for them. They're just kind of, they're finding their footing as a band and as musicians. Some of them, this is their first time doing anything like this at all, ever. You know, yeah, it's definitely an important exploration album for them.
Yeah, I think Gerard talked a little bit in Murder Scene about that, like, once they got in the studio, it was like, oh shit, this is real.
This is real.
We're actually doing this, and we're spending money on it. What?
Yeah, when you start spending money on stuff, that's when you're like, oh, this better be good.
Yeah. And we talked a little bit about band dynamics, but the reason they wanted to have, like, the gang mentality was because the band was sort of formed because they all kind of felt like outcasts. And Gerard said before they used it as, like, group therapy, which is a very Doom Patrol-y thing to do. Mm-hmm. I think that idea with the band also contributes, or also is played into with his, like, comic book proclivities of, like, having these people who are all super talented, perhaps super powered,
right,
getting together in a group to save the world.
Yeah, whenever he draws comics of them, it's always they're fighting with their instruments.
They are.
That Ray's like got electricity shooting out of the end of his guitar to destroy something, and Frank is bashing something over the head with it.
Yeah, there is a big difference in how they both use their guitars as weapons, where Ray is always like lighting out the headstock, and Frank's is just like, I'm going to use this as a mallet.
Oh, wow. And Frank and Ray didn't mesh well at first either when Frank first joined the band, because Ray was really resistant to having another guitarist in the band.
Yeah, I think he said he was scared.
Yeah, he was really scared about how that would go, and, you know, having to collaborate with someone musically and share guitar ideas and have to compromise a little bit in maybe compromise in style or compromise in certain ideas that he wanted to do that maybe wouldn't mesh well with Frank's. Mm-hmm. But I mean, obviously it worked out for the better. But yeah,
Ray was Sunsets.
Yeah, I mean, Ray was really resistant to it at first, but I think it helped open up some doors for them that obviously they couldn't have played that stuff live with just Ray.
Oh no. And I think that also, like, Ray is above this, but also there's, like, a long-standing punk metal adversity, which I think probably played into that a little bit, because those styles are so different, and those communities also don't like each other sometimes.
Right,
or historically don't like each other.
I love the quote where Frank compares their playing styles to, like, what is it? Frank said that his playing, comparing them was like comparing an egg salad sandwich to a Rolex.
Oh my god! Which one is the sandwich?
You would imagine that because Frank is so self-deprecating, he's probably the sandwich.
He's probably the sandwich.
And Ray is the Rolex. Because Ray was so technical and so clean in everything that he did that he was just
Rolex quality.
Yes, Rolex quality. But he said
it's Swiss watch quality.
Swiss watch. But he said, as far as our relationship, there was a certain amount of coming to terms, Frank said. It was like, all right, this is the new relationship for the band. Ray's always been a perfectionist in certain respects, and I feel like I dirtied him down while he cleaned me up. I imagine it was hard for him.
Oh, Ray.
Yeah, Ray.
I love Ray.
He got used to it after a while, though, and they started playing off each other a lot, and they worked well with each other.
MCR is, like, unique in that it does mix these, like, beautiful metal solos with regular punk chords.
Yeah, the
like
punk power chords.
Yeah, that is, like, very unique to the band, and musically is part of what makes the band awesome.
Yeah.
So good on them for figuring that out. As far as what the band was like in 2002, 2003, they focused a lot on touring. Again, they made this record so that they could have something to tour on. And they really threw themselves into that. And the first tour they got, the first real tour that wasn't like a basement show or a house show or something, was a 2-week tour with a band called North Star. And it was probably their longest tour at that moment. And they were like, oh shit, what are we going to do for 2 weeks? And I think the like van broke down a few times.
Oh my gosh.
But by the time they got past the tour and got their second tour, that's when Frank got his scorpion tattoo on his neck.
Yeah.
To make sure he could never get a real job. And he and Mikey both dropped out of college. So everyone kind of like started committing.
Right.
The more they went on, they gradually got bigger tours. They opened for Under Oath, Taking Back Sunday, and The Used, where obviously they made great friends with Bert, and they met Brian because he used to be The Used tour manager.
That was a really important connection for them to make.
Oh yeah, and I think they probably knew Brian a little bit before because he had flown out specifically to meet them in like August of 2002.
Yeah.
And it took like a lot of months before they eventually hired him.
They were like very closed off to the idea of anyone else coming into their little circle. They were like,
they're a gang.
I don't trust you.
Yeah. I think he like courted them specifically.
Yeah.
And also somewhere in there, eventually they toured with Reggie and the Full Effect, which is how they met James DeWeese.
James DeWeese!
Secret full-time MCR member.
Yeah.
In MCR5. R.I.P.
Yeah. R.I.P. Rest in pieces.
But yeah, so they met, they knew Brian, and Brian had a lot of interaction with them through The Used, and I think, like, encouraged The Used to take them on tour. He started talking to them in August 2002, and they finally just agreed to hire him in February 2003. So it was a long process. Also, at some point, they had an opening for Jimmy Eat World, who was really big then, and I think it was an audience of 7,000 people, which was their biggest audience to date.
Yeah, it's big for them.
The band had a very, like, they didn't have a lot of struggles that other bands had, where, like, they start out sucking, and they don't get a lot of attention for a while. The band had a very linearly upward trajectory of growing all the time.
Yeah.
And it was really quick for them.
Right. Yeah, it was really fast. I mean, if you think about 2006, they'd only been a band for 4 years.
And they were the biggest band in the world.
Right.
Crazy.
Yeah, it's nuts.
My head explodes when I think about that too much.
Yeah.
But eventually, they signed to a major label. And New Jersey had become like the new hunting grounds for labels because of Thursday blowing up and Midtown and Taking Back Sunday. So like they talk about it in Life on the Murder Scene that they were just label people all over New Jersey talking to them all the time.
Yeah. People like stalking them and
like
grabbing them in alleys.
I said that like even like the week after they recorded the album, they were having drinks with an A&R guy.
That's insane.
Yeah, people just wanting to get a band from New Jersey.
Right.
I think they really didn't respond to that.
No, definitely not. Everything that was like super corporate like that and people saying, oh, I can get you all this money and I can do this for you and blah, 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 they're super not into it.
Yeah, they waited. They waited for a while because they had this thing about only wanting to work with people who like really wanted to work with them, and so they made them wait for ages before they gave them anything.
And they also said that they wanted to be a band for a while too, that because they didn't have time to
they just started
get used to each other or get used to the band life and touring and making music together, so they just wanted time to chill together. And I think that says a lot about them too, because a lot of people, I mean, I understand it too, because if you're a young band and these big major labels are coming up to you and saying, hey, I can do all this stuff for you and get you all this money and make you really successful. As a young baby band, you're like, yes, let's do this. This is my only shot. This is all I'm going to get. That's what it feels like. And
then it turns into Josie and the Pussycats cautionary tale. You'll become a product.
Yeah.
But eventually they did agree to sign to a major label, and that was Reprise Records with Craig Aronson, who's their A&R guy. And it took 9 months of talking for them to finally sign.
That's a whole baby.
It's an entire baby. Jeff Rickley did a podcast, which I don't remember the name of. It was about, like, the music business.
Oh, yeah, I listened to that. That was really good.
Yeah, and so the guy was asking him about the differences between Thursday and MCR, because Thursday also signed to a big label, and it was, like, a big Jersey drama.
Right.
So what Jeff said that MCR did differently was that a lot of people accused Thursday of selling out, you know, and they had problems. They eventually got into the label of, like, band dynamics started breaking down and, like, their sound wasn't what they wanted it to be. But Jeff said that MCR really decided to, like, take it and run with it. They said, okay, we're going to sign to a major label, but we're going to use this to do our thing our way. They're going to give us more money and more equipment and space to practice and, like, a better producer, and we're going to use this to fulfill our vision rather than their vision. So I think they were, like, particularly headstrong with signing to a major label, not wanting to capitulate to industry dudes.
Right. I want to take a damn business class from them, because, like...
Yeah!
I mean, you know, to be that young and that new in the music scene and be that headstrong about your vision and your band and your business, about how you're going to make money and how you're going to market this and how you're going to make it. Yeah, I want to take a business class for MCR.
I want to know, because Jeff can only tell you so much, you know, from the outside. Yeah. But I want to know, from MCR's mouths, how they managed to do that. Because did they get a lot of pressure? Did they not get any pressure?
Right, and they always say in interviews, like, oh, yeah, there was no pressure from blah, blah, blah. But there must have been pressure. Like, you don't work with a major label with no pressure.
Yeah. I don't know, because it was a time when, like, New Jersey bands were seen as, like, a gold mine, and so maybe they trusted them more, but I don't know. And they did have this long vetting process. Maybe it was just that Craig was, like, an awesome dude.
Oh, man. Yeah, Craig seemed like a really genuinely good dude, that he believed in the bands, and he really genuinely wanted the best for them.
I don't know. Maybe you can help me. I don't remember if Frank said this or Gerard said this. It was in recent years, but they were talking about when it was weird to be in the music business. And I think they were mostly talking about, like, Parade. They would have this big conference table where they would get, like, a huge group of people together to talk about, you know, what the stage is going to be like and, like, the art direction and marketing, etc. And then someone mentioned that the weirdest thing they ever had to do, and if this is the weirdest thing, then, like, it's not that bad, They went to some corporate retreat and had to put on a show for some sort of top-level executives, like a dozen top-level executives.
Yeah, and it was like they had to fully perform for them, like they were on stage.
But it wasn't like the setting that you would do it in.
Were just kind of like,
yeah.
You can't see my face, but just 100% straight face, just deadpan.
So like, if that's the worst thing they ever had to do, I mean, it's pretty weird, but like, it's not that bad.
No,
it's not Josie and the Pussycats bad. That's my reference point for bad music industry people.
Oh my gosh.
Subliminal messages in your songs. Psychological manipulation.
Oh my god. I wanted to talk about Mikey too, because I know that we've kind of left him out a little bit in our discussion.
Sorry, Mikey.
I know, sorry, Mikey.
You're important. Yeah,
and I've heard from some bass players that some of the Bullets bass lines are the hardest to play.
Bullets is a very technically complicated album because they didn't know any better.
Right.
So
and I know nothing about bass, but I mean, if it's, because this person was like, yeah, I can play bass for Revenge and I can play bass for Black Parade, but when I go back to Bullets, it's just hard to get the hang of. And I don't know if that's because it's technically good or it's just because they didn't know what they were doing.
It's probably because, I mean, I don't know about good, and I don't play bass, but the hardest parts of bass are when you have to be jumping around. It's all your left hand, Right. So the hardest parts of bass would be when you have to jump around a lot on the fretboard. I haven't looked at the bass lines because, again, I don't play bass. Mm-hmm. But I'm also not surprised because the guitar in Bullets is the hardest guitar.
Yeah.
So I would 0% be surprised if that bass is the hardest bass.
Yeah. And Mikey, I think, was kind of everybody's little brother. Mm-hmm. And everybody wanted to look out for him and, help him and encourage him and support him. But he was kind of a party animal.
Yeah, I mean, that's how the band kind of formed a little bit. Is because he went to so many parties and because he interned with Eyeball and knew so many people and he just was very well connected.
Yeah, very social because he was just kind of hanging out in Eyeball so much anyway. He was just there, like, not getting paid. And
not getting paid.
Just kind of hanging out. And they were like, all right, well, why don't you do something useful and just be an intern? And he was like, okay, cool. So, that's obviously a really important part of the band's history is that Mikey kind of got them into Eyeball.
Yeah.
But he was definitely a partier. And this is literally, I don't mean for this to sound like a fanfic.
God.
But this is in the book. It's in the book.
Okay.
Where they said Mikey partied a lot. And they would talk to him after a party and say, who is that girl you hooked up with? And he's like, I don't know.
Yeah.
What the heck?
I mean, seems about right.
Yeah. But he also had terrible stage fright, though, regardless of how much of a social butterfly he was. He was terrified when he had to go up on stage. That's why he doesn't move a lot, and he had to
That's also why they got drunk a lot.
Yeah, they had to get really drunk, like, at their first few shows to even get up on stage and do that.
Mm-hmm. And another comment on the bass. Bullets is the album where I can hear the bass the most.
Mm-hmm.
In a lot of songs, I notice the bass line, and you don't, especially in, like, Parade and stuff, you don't, because everything else there's more production and whatnot. But regardless of whether or not the bass is, like, the most difficult there, it's at least the most present.
Yeah.
Which is kind of cool. Alright, so they got on Reprise, which is a subsidiary of Warner Brothers, and they started working on Revenge. And with Warner Brothers, they had, like, a professional studio, a lot of equipment, vintage guitars, and they also got a new producer, whose name is Howard Benson.
Somebody ordered pizza.
He's known for wearing a lot of sweatpants. He produced a few Motorhead records, which they were really impressed by. Mm-hmm. And he also is another person that asked to work with MCR specifically, which they really liked.
Yeah.
And so this isn't confirmed, but there's some interviews that MCR did in their Revenge days where it seems like perhaps Frank and Howard clashed a little bit.
Maybe they butted heads a little bit.
I can't, we'll never know for sure, but some interviews Frank has done about producers and good producers and bad producers, he never names names, but I feel like Howard is
You kind of get the vibe that Howard is the one that tore them down so they could build back up.
Yeah. Not confirmed, just her feelings, but he also insulted the Misfits, and Frank was flabbergasted.
Do not insult the Misfits in front of Frank.
This is the quote between Frank and Howard about the Misfits. Frank says, "I remember saying something about the Misfits one day, and his reaction to the conversation was to say, 'Yeah, well, how many records did the Misfits sell?' I was like, 'What the fuck? Are you crazy?'"
I kind of get the vibe, and I'm sure he's a great guy, but I kind of get the vibe from Howard Benson that he's way more industry and way more, like, I don't know, top-level producer feel.
Yeah, and they talk about in this interview with Blender about making Revenge that he wanted a big sounding record, and it's not as big sounding as Black Parade will be, but it is a much larger sounding record than Bullets for sure. I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing, but I do think it sort of might go against Frank's punk ethos.
Right. Benson had a reputation for focusing more on the singers, thinking that they're kind of the centerpiece for the band, and working closely with them on melodies and getting their performances to be bigger and more emotional, kind of just allowing the band to fall in behind the singer, which also doesn't really mesh well with their vibe as a gang.
Yeah, they're not a very hierarchical band.
No. But the media, I think, made them that way because they always put Gerard front and center. And
yeah, there's definitely a certain order when they do photo shoots or something of like how they're positioned.
Right.
But Gerard is like the aesthetic, for sure, the aesthetic leader of the band. Probably Gerard and like also a little bit of Frank. And also recording Revenge, Ray has said that Revenge is the album where MCR really found itself, which makes a lot of sense because in Bullets they're working to find it, and in Revenge they like actually hone in on it.
Yeah.
But also, while they were recording Revenge, Frank and Gerard were doing a lot of pills. Yeah, so this is where it starts to get bad for Gerard, and Frank has said before that they were doing so many pills. I don't know how long it took them to record the album, but they were doing so many pills that there were some weekends during that recording process that he like can't even remember.
Right.
So they were kind of going heavily into that, and I think they were doing it not necessarily in secret, but Ray didn't know about it at least for a while.
Right. They weren't very open about it. They weren't like, "Oh yeah, I have this problem and this is what I'm doing."
No, they were just sort of like
kind of like
doing it.
Yeah, behind closed doors, like kind of not secretive, but they definitely weren't talking about it.
Yeah, I was really surprised in the interview where Ray was like, "I've never heard about this before." Now I was like,
"Yeah, like how could you?"
Whoa.
Yeah.
That something about that says a lot.
Yeah.
But that sort of starts or continues Gerard's spiral into substance abuse, or to substance abuse to a point where like it's not functional anymore. And so Revenge comes out in June 2004. MCR goes on Warped Tour. And by the time they end Warped Tour, fly to Japan, and do Summer Sonic, which is in early August of 2004, that's when Gerard has his breakdown and gets like so drunk he's absolutely non-functional.
Right.
It gets suicidal, calls Brian. They have to like talk through it together. Ray's like, "This guy is actually sick. We need to do something about it." They fly back to the US and he gets clean in like 2 weeks. They drop Matt. And that's sort of how that all goes down.
Yeah, when they went to Japan, he said that he packed like as little as possible. He
packed
like,
show clothes and that's it.
That's it. Because he was like, "I'm not coming back from this. This is, I'm going to die in Japan, and that's it." I know this is their last show as that band before they transition into the new band. You know what I'm talking about? Like,
yeah, to Clean and Sober band.
Yeah, Clean and Sober band.
Clean and Sober for Gerard.
Well, yeah. Just they're a different band after Summer Sonic, but this show I feel was, some of Gerard's best vocals.
The reason the vocals are so good though is like, one, the song is just a very prophetic song in a bad way. They're definitely his best vocals, but also because they sound so heartfelt.
Yeah, and we're talking about House of the Rising Sun. We didn't mention that. We're talking about...
Well, we'll put a clip in it somewhere.
Yeah.
There is a house in New Orleans, and it's called the Rising Sun, and it's been the ruin of many a poor boy, and Lord knows I am one.
Those are some of my favorite vocals that Gerard has ever done.
Yeah. I don't know if they sound so tragic because they are just tragic sounding vocals or because we just know what happens after them. But they are really beautiful, but they're sad beautiful.
Yeah. melancholy.
Yeah. I guess you're gonna go out with a bang.
And then when they get back from tour, I can't remember, it was after Bullet's tour ended though, they got home and their grandmother passed away.
Yeah, and they toured a lot in Bullets. They toured constantly on Bullets. Got home. I think Gerard actually, she was sick, and Gerard had plans to see her the next day.
Right.
Went to sleep, woke up, and she had passed away.
Right, exactly, yeah. Yeah, and he felt so shitty about that. Which then inspired, I think it kind of guided the entire vibe of Revenge.
Yeah, he said before, like, this is, people like this record, and it's amazing because it's a record about two boys losing their grandmother.
Right.
I think it also, we'll talk about this more in our actual Revenge episode. I think I've heard that Helena was supposed to be a song more about a woman dying in a car crash, and then it became a song about their grandmother.
Right.
But I'll put a pin in that.
Get there.
Revenge was definitely a follow-up thematically to Bullets. Bullets starts the whole Thousand Evil Men narrative, and then it continues in Revenge. But there's also, like, some smaller themes that pop up in Bullets that appear in Revenge and also appear throughout MCR generally, but especially in Revenge. One of those that we've talked about is violent love. So in Revenge, that's like two kinds of violent love, where there's this Bonnie and Clyde pair who have violent love with each other because they're criminals and just generally bad at relationships and have a destructive relationship that ends in one of them dying. And there's also the violence in making the deal with the devil of, their love is so great that the surviving person makes a deal to get 1,000 evil souls, which means they kill 1,000 people to get their love back. So it's violence in two different directions.
Mm-hmm.
And there's also a lot of blood and guns and, like, body horror imagery in My Chemical Romance, but it's never there, like, just for effect or just for shock. It's usually tied in with love.
Yeah, they're never there for shock factor.
It's never, like, destruction for destruction's sake. It's always in, like, a metaphor of love, which I think aesthetically fits nice into, like, their horror themes, and also is a way of saying to, like, other bands at the time, because, like, love is not an uncommon, subject matter for songs.
Right.
And especially in the genre of emo at that time, there was a lot of, when you talked about love in a song, it was about, like, a jilted boyfriend and, like, this girl sucks, or, like, being so brokenhearted that you're gonna die. And I think MCR found a way of saying, you can make art out of this. Just talk about it.
Right.
Like you're sad.
Yeah, not everything has to be so straightforward. You can make something really artistic out of it.
Yeah. But speaking to horror, so there's also a lot of horror in Bullets, which follows them throughout their future albums. We've got, like, classic horror of, like, zombies and vampires and murders and, like, a smattering of demons. I think we can gather demons from Satan. I think we're just gonna add demons in there. Ugh, this seems like such a bad idea now. But here we go. We talked about it.
We're gonna do it. All right, here we go.
So, when you talk about horror, you also are kind of referencing the Sublime. Okay? Are you with me?
Yeah, I'm here.
Alright. So the Sublime is a romantic concept.
Okay.
And it was not originated with Edmund Burke, but he did talk about it. And so this is how he defined what the Sublime is. Sublime is whatever is fitted in any sort to excite the ideas of pain and danger, whatever is in any sort terrible, or is conversant about terrible objects, or operates in a manner analogous to terror. So the whole idea was that when you are terrified, it ignites some sort of existential part of you, and that part of you is also kind of excited. And so it's like this intertwining of, like, terror and ecstasy that reveals to you the nature of life.
Okay.
And so the Romantics a lot of the times use the Sublime in reference to, like, nature. This, like, genre of going to, like, the highest peak in the Alps and, like, looking out and, like, having a moment of, like, sublime terror.
Okay.
Because you're, like, so high and, like, nothing matters, and you're like, holy shit, nothing matters.
Right.
That's terrifying.
Yeah.
But after the Romantics, the Gothics took it and used horror as a metaphor for that same thing instead of nature. And so then you have, like, Mary Shelley writing Frankenstein. And Frankenstein is supposed to symbolize, like, the thrill of the horrific. It's so horrific that he's a pieced together person made out of other body parts, and then he himself feels the horror of his own existence when he wakes up. And so MCR sort of follows in those footsteps, because these lyrics are always filled with imagery, usually horror imagery, and it has sort of more imagery than plot. It's more kind of like a painting in that way. And Gerard has called them spooky lyrics before, which I think is kind of cool. And so it's meant to convey images of horror or destruction as like aesthetically beautiful. Aesthetically beautiful. Mm-hmm. So that bad things like pain or death or heartbreak become beautiful.
Okay.
And it sort of like creates this experience that I think mimics the sublime. Got it.
Yeah, makes sense.
I'm so sorry for going on this rant. I just couldn't think about anything else. Because I took this romantics class, guys. I studied abroad. And it's really stuck with me. And it also, the Thousand Evil Men storyline also is kind of a Faustian story of like making a deal with the devil.
Yeah.
Which is kind of cool.
We've had a lot of Faust come up, and I think we need to touch on this. Maybe not the whole thing now, but at some point, Phantom of the Paradise.
Beef.
I think that Beef is my favorite character. I think that Phantom of the Paradise is a movie that is kind of a parody of Phantom of the Opera, and it was made in the 70s.
Yeah,
and it's one of Gerard's favorite movies, and
you know what? It's one of the best movies.
Yeah, and
period.
He and James Dewey used to watch this over and over and over again on tour, and I think that he pulled from this movie way more heavily than anyone realized.
Beef.
Maybe, I mean, gosh, Beef is just Gerard. I'm gonna put it out there. Beef is just Gerard.
Oh God, sometimes I'm really sad that this is an audio format because I really want to do some video juxtapositions.
When we get into Phantom of the Paradise in depth, we can do that. We can talk about that.
We should just have an episode on it.
I'm ready. Anyway, but we'll get into that later. But if you haven't seen that movie, please go watch it, and you will hear all the references that Gerard pulled from it.
Beef.
But another thing that Gerard kind of creates, and the band also kind of creates, is the emo aesthetic. Mm-hmm. So before they came about and kind of created that vibe, the horror vibe with the black and the red and the hair and the eyeliner. Before that, emo was like Jawbreaker.
Yeah,
or
Jawbreaker,
like
Sunny Day Real Estate.
Thursday and Saves the Day. And
Circus Survive, cursive. Yeah, so...
And those bands did not wear, like, the black and the hair and the eyeliner and...
Well, emo has this weird history, okay? And if you're getting upset, just sit down, okay? And let me talk about this.
Take several seats.
Because I'm in that emo group on Facebook, and it's the most annoying thing I've ever read in my life. But anyway, so emo has this weird history.
You better specify which one.
I'm not going to, because they're going to come after me. It's not the MCR group. I love the MCR group.
Yep.
But anyway, so... here's where people get confused and shitty when they talk about emo. So emo, as a label, started as a genre label in the 80s and 90s for a genre of music that was kind of related to post-punk, post-hardcore punk. And that's fine. And then it got applied to bands like Fall Out Boy and Panic! At the Disco and My Chemical Romance. And they're not unrelated to that genre. But the media took the label emo and made it apply to an aesthetic.
Yes.
Which is not what it originally meant. Mm-hmm. And got very confusing for people. For white men who were like, this isn't emo. And to this day are like, this isn't emo. Because now it's like Midwestern emo, which has these plinky, pretentious guitar lines. Anyway. And it's still really sad boy. But anyway. Mm-hmm. So people got fucking, and are still fucking up in arms that anyone calls a band like My Chemical Romance emo. And one, genre-wise, it's not exactly wrong to call them emo, especially in their first two albums. Two, it's not their fault they're called emo, because the media made emo apply to something that was entirely different. It made it apply to, like, eyeliner and wearing black and red and being sad. And now we have this other brand of emo, which is like emo SoundCloud rap.
Oh my god.
And the only reason it's called emo is because it has sad lyrics. So now it just sort of like means sad. It means sad unless you're someone who's into Midwestern emo, which because it means Midwestern emo and you get really upset when people use it to mean sad.
Oh boy.
And that's valid because like it's just a really weird. I feel like we shouldn't brand music by whether or not it's sad or emotional. Because, like, most music is emotional, so.
A lot of it is.
It became a really weird word to use and, like, kind of lost a lot of its meaning and then meant something else. And then it was derogatory and, like, it's just very strange.
Yeah, it took a weird journey.
But MCR, for better or for worse, was foundational in kind of, like, changing the meaning of emo because of their very strong aesthetic of black and red and blood and emotion and, like, being vulnerable and wearing their hearts on their sleeves. That sort of became what it meant.
Mm-hmm.
And they were sort of the beginning of that change. And I think it really bit them and others in the ass later.
Yeah.
But...
yeah, I think they were kind of pioneers in the aesthetic of emo. And I'm not saying that they were the first ones to ever do this or that they were the only ones to ever do this, but I'm saying that
they were kind of concurrent.
That they were one of the first bands to be put in the spotlight like that and have people latch onto that aesthetic and say, I want this aesthetic as my own.
Mm-hmm.
And
I hate people with this aesthetic.
Right, I hate people with this aesthetic and I'm going to beat them up.
Yeah.
I think that they were mostly pioneers in the head of that movement where it was like, yeah, we're going to dress how we want to and we're into this horror aesthetic and we don't give a shit what you think and we like blood and we're going to be blah, blah. And then as soon as people started latching onto it and it became popular, they were like, oh.
Like, oh, we built a monster.
Didn't want this. And now we're going to move away from it a little bit.
Yeah. I think that they were really confused when people started calling them that because for them who'd grown up on the actual emo music.
They were like, no, we're not.
They were like, I'm confused.
Yeah.
And also because it started being used in a derogatory way.
Yeah.
But that's sort of something that happened kind of out of their control. And we'll talk about that later too, about how the media's reaction to MCR, because it was wild.
I can't wait.
I'm gonna be
excited.
so mad.
Uh-oh. Reel it in.
Yeah. If, hey, don't go on a date with a dude who really likes Midwestern emo music, because they're not a dude you want to hang around. Just saying. I just can't stand that group. I really cannot.
Then leave it!
Sometimes it has, like, videos, because sometimes what I love about that group is that sometimes someone will break in and be like, guys, I listen to MCR and they're actually pretty good. And I'm like, hello?
Hello, I'm here.
I am here. I just kind of love seeing those moments of, like, come to Jesus moments of, like, hey, maybe we should all chill out.
Yeah. I feel like when you attack bands and groups and artists like that, it's kind of a juvenile thing.
Oh, yeah.
Where, like, because, you know, we all used to do that as, like, 13, 14-year-olds. Of like, oh, I hate Miley Cyrus because she's pop and blah, blah.
She's a prep.
Yeah, she's a prep, and I'm goth, and they're different than me, and I don't like them. There was really that separation as a kid between, you know, pop artists and rock and punk and
preps and punks.
Yeah, or like, you know, hating Justin Bieber or hating Kanye West, or I mean, you know, there are valid reasons to
now you can hate Kanye West for other reasons.
There are valid reasons to hate Justin Bieber and Kanye West, but as a kid, when they had not come out as shitty people and you just hating their music and stuff, it was just because you're different and because you're other and you don't fit in and you claim that and you want everyone to know, like, I don't like this stuff. Yeah. But I think kind of as you get older, you let go and I listen to Miley Cyrus, like...
Yeah, you know who's super fine? Miley Cyrus. Like, she's a fine person.
Yeah.
She's living her best life. Leave her alone.
Letting go of those self-imposed boundaries where you allow yourself as you get older to start listening to pop, or you allow yourself to start liking Britney Spears again, or NSYNC, or like...
Man, Britney's vocal, I don't know, man.
Leave Britney alone.
Listen, I respect Britney, but there was a vocal choice made that I'm confused about.
There was, and I blame the industry.
It's probably the industry's fault. Yeah, there's definitely... I mean, I think it's really natural to identify yourself with difference, to be like, you know, I'm different from that, or I don't like that, and that's a difference. And so my identity is based on sort of like this negative space. Mm-hmm. I think that's really natural, but I do think that if you notice it in yourself, you should make an effort to sort of break that down and be like,
why do I feel this?
Yeah, why do I feel like negative about this thing? And is there a way to identify myself that like doesn't have to do with, doesn't focus on hating something else and has more to focus on feeling positive about something else.
Yes.
That's a life lesson.
Yeah. It's just as a kid, you feel so negative about everything that you even minutely do not like.
Yeah,
You're
and that's
just,
natural. I
yeah,
mean,
it's normal. It's totally normal.
groups are natural human things, dude.
Right. You get cliquey and you get into your gang and you cling to that gang and you're like, nothing else is good. Nothing else is, valid. But you grow out of it as you get older, and I think that's a good thing, and it's a sign
You should grow out of it as you get older.
You should, and I think growing out of it is a sign of maturity and a sign of growing up as a person.
And I think, like, it's also just a journey.
Yeah.
I think you can probably fix, like, the most obvious things, and, like, other things come up later, and you're like, oh, I didn't know about this. And you feel shitty, and you're like, oh, I should have fixed this by now. But no, It's fine. There's always time to fix it. Mm-hmm. Second life lesson. So, I think that's all we've got.
Yeah, we covered everything. Maybe not everything, but everything that we felt that we had to cover. Yeah. I'm going to feel bad if we forgot something.
We've got a whole revenge cycle to go through.
Yeah.
I mean, we did not forget anything about bullets officially. Yeah. We have so covered bullets. And we may have another bullets episode. But yeah, so when this episode comes out, we will be in Chicago, which is not a place we usually are. We will have just finished Riot Fest, where we will have hopefully seen Weezer and Taking Back Sunday and The Bouncing Souls and Bad Religion and Elvis Costello and Run the Jewels, and I'm so excited.
I'm very excited.
And hopefully we'll have seen some Twitter friends there.
Yeah, and some really Facebook friends too.
Facebook friends. So yeah.
Yep. All right. So that ends it for today.
Follow us on the social medias. Twitter at Chemical Fancast, Instagram at Chemical Fancast, Facebook My Chemical Fancast. Leave us a review if you like us. If you ever want to send us an email, we're at mychemicalfancast@gmail.com. And in fact, if you have a fan story to send us about, like, whether or not you met one of the guys or met the band or how you got into the band or just anything interesting you have to say, we would like to collect those to hopefully feature you in a future episode.
Every story is a good story.
Every story is a good story, and send it to whatever medium you want. DM it to us on Twitter or Instagram, or send us an email, whatever, because we would like to hopefully get up a good collection of those and add those to our future episodes. Add you to our future episodes.
Heck yeah.
Please be our friends. But until next time, I'm Kat.
And I'm Haley.
And this has been My Chemical Fancast. And we'll see you in 2 weeks.